always improvising and coming up with ideas, but they're always either being used for the current commission or being filed away for later use. Oh, there's nothing scarier than a blank piece of paper. My compositional process, I try to make as different as possible each time I create, because obviously that leads you down different pathways. But I think the things that stay constant are the notion that I do most of my writing by hand, so all the drafting is done by hand. I think there's a great correlation between the speed that I think and the speed that I can write. And so that's really important to me. So that's something in common with all my pieces, is that they start from those sketches. And I find that really helps me think about form as well, and just the flexibility of where ideas can be, because often that first idea you come up with is something that is really the developed idea, and you need to kind of work backwards from there. And so I often will have, once I'm partway through a piece, even though I have an idea of the form to start with, and I'll often sketch that just graphically first. Sometimes I'll take the scraps of musical ideas and sort of rearrange them on my wall and say, all right, what would it look like if that was over here? And then how could that unwind into this section? And then how could that build to this? And sort of just imagine different structures for it. A lot of my work is inspired by other disciplines. So text is something that often inspires me, but also visual art and dance as well are sort of two art forms that I've revisited and used as stimulus as well. So I often use other art forms as a way to give myself, constraints creatively. And so a piece I wrote a couple of years ago for the Benno Trio, which was a Musica Viva commission, the commission had come with the stipulation that it had to be related to Brisbane somehow. And that was a really hard thing to think about. And it definitely played around in my head for a long time before I sort of settled on something. And I was coming back from the airport and trying to think about what it's like, arriving in that city. And I just happened to see this piece of public artwork that was fairly new, I'd never seen before. And it was this beautiful, big, spinning top, like a children's toy. But what it actually is, when I went and looked at the work, it's a replica of a cathedral that was supposed to be built on that site that was never built. So it fell victim to embezzlement and other such wonderful rumours. And so it's the dome of the cathedral that's upturned, and it's just absolutely stunning. You've got this huge, like in the middle of all the city high-rises, this huge, playful-like creature. And it's just really delightful. And so that was something that I took and kind of had this kind of perpetual motion sort of idea in the piece, where it comes to rest, but also took that kind of playfulness of everyone's just rushing around the city, going about their business, and there is just this huge playful object nearby, which I think is really wonderful. So I guess that's a way that these things filter through into the music. I think perhaps if I had been more eloquent in my use of the English language, I might have wanted to be a writer. I've always loved the process of writing. And so a lot of my work is based on text, even if it's instrumental music, where it is inspired by text that I think is really beautiful, or just something that grabs my attention and I feel compelled to respond to it. But one thing I do really enjoy about music is just that ambiguity that it gives you. It's sort of, there's this veil of detachment that you can have. I mean, you never have detachment from your work, but there's a space between you and the audience, I suppose, in some way that you can leave as open or as closed as you like. And I think that's a real luxury that our art form has that many art forms don't have. I think when I was younger, I could look back a year and be horrified at the works, and they felt like another person had written them. But I think it becomes more forgiving the more you age, where you look back 10 years and you can see the value in things, and you understand them as well as sort of these markers of that time and place and the person you were and the influences you had, the performers who were around you, and what was going on in your life. There might be weaknesses in the piece, but you're more willing to think, well, that's all right, younger self, we're over that now, hopefully. But yeah, I think it is, you do become a bit more forgiving. I think revisiting older works and then reworking them, it's not something that I choose to do, but recently I've had a couple of ensembles approach me and have commissioned arrangements of older works for their instrumentation or for shorter durations. And I try as much as possible to stay true to the work of what it was in its time. And while sometimes there is the temptation to think, oh, but with this idea now and the skills I have now, I would explore this in a totally different way. And there might be bits of material that you are excited by. But in my mind, I think if I really want to do that, I should do that in a new piece in its own landscape and leave that original work to sit in the language. And I think the trick is always just twisting the piece that you're wanting to write into whatever the current project is and imagining a way that those two things can meet. But I think as well that you start to rely on those creative restrictions. So you're looking for the next set of rules that you can bend and push and play around within. So I think that actually provides a lot of the stimulus for a piece, particularly when you're creating, frequently, or constantly, where it's one deadline, you finished that yesterday and then it's like the next morning, all right, well, what are you creating now? What's the next on the agenda? Like those restrictions are really important.